Have you ever walked away from a conversation replaying it in your head, wishing you had handled it differently? Someone makes a subtle joke at your expense, a dismissive comment, a tone that says, "You're not that important." It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it lands. And in that moment, your body reacts before your mind does. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race. You either laugh it off while feeling smaller inside, or you snap back and regret it later. Disrespect rarely comes as a direct attack. It comes disguised as humor, sarcasm, or just being honest. And that's why most people mishandle it. They overreact and look unstable, or they underreact and look weak. Both responses quietly lower your position. Here's what most people don't realize. When someone disrespects you, they're not just expressing an opinion. They're testing your emotional stability. They're measuring how easily they can move you. And the moment you become reactive, you give them the answer. The Stoics understood something powerful about human behavior. You cannot control what others say. You cannot prevent people from projecting their insecurity onto you. But you can control one thing that changes the entire dynamic: your response. Not your comeback, not your volume, your response. Because the right response doesn't escalate conflict, it shifts power. Today, we're going to break down 5 Stoic responses that make disrespect backfire instantly. These aren't aggressive tactics. They aren't manipulative tricks. They are calm, controlled moves that expose insecurity without you losing composure. By the end of this video, you'll understand why staying emotionally steady under pressure is more intimidating than any clever insult, and how to respond in a way that makes people think twice before testing you again. Let's start by understanding why disrespect happens in the first place. Before you can respond correctly to disrespect, you have to understand what it actually is. Most people assume disrespect is about hatred, arrogance, or bad manners. Sometimes it is, but more often it's something else. It's a test. In social dynamics, human beings are constantly measuring one another, not always consciously, but constantly. We test boundaries, we test confidence, we test emotional control. A dismissive comment, a sarcastic jab, or a public interruption is often less about hurting you and more about seeing how you react. Disrespect is rarely random. It's exploratory. The person wants to know, can I move you? Can I destabilize you? Can I lower your position without consequence? If you respond emotionally, by snapping, defending, over-explaining, or visibly shrinking, you answer those questions for them. You confirm that your internal state is influenced by their behavior. And the moment someone realizes they can control your emotional temperature, the power dynamic shifts. This is why emotional baiting works so often. It triggers your ego. It activates your need to defend your identity. It pushes you into reaction mode. But here's the deeper truth. Confident, grounded individuals don't need to rush into defense. They don't experience every comment as a threat to their worth. Their sense of identity isn't fragile. That's what makes them hard to shake. Stoicism teaches that external events are neutral. It is our interpretation that creates disturbance. When someone disrespects you, the event itself is simply sound, words in the air. What gives it power is your attachment to how you believe you should be perceived. When you detach from that need, something interesting happens. You stop playing defense. And when you stop defending, you stop lowering yourself. The goal is not to suppress emotion. It's to master it. It's to recognize that most disrespectful behavior reveals more about the other person's insecurity than your value. Once you see disrespect as a test rather than an insult, you stop reacting impulsively. You start responding strategically. Now let's move into the first 2 Stoic responses that immediately disrupt this test and shift the power back to you. Response number 1, the calm clarification. When someone makes a subtle insult, most people either fire back or pretend it didn't happen. The Stoic does something different. They calmly ask, "What do you mean by that?" Then they stop talking. This response is powerful because disrespect often hides behind ambiguity. The person delivers a comment that can be denied if challenged. It gives them plausible deniability. If you react emotionally, they can say, "Relax, I was just joking." Now you look unstable. But when you calmly ask for clarification, you remove the shield. You force them to define their intent. And here's what usually happens. They either soften the statement, backtrack, or awkwardly explain themselves. The moment they have to restate the insult directly, it loses its subtle power. The key is tone, no sarcasm, no visible irritation, just controlled curiosity. Imagine someone says in a meeting, "Well, not everyone here has the experience to understand this." Instead of defending yourself, you respond evenly, "Are you referring to me?" Now the spotlight shifts. The test flips. They must either own the implication or retreat. Calm clarification exposes insecurity without aggression. It signals that you are not easily shaken, and that alone changes the dynamic. Response number 2, the short boundary. The second response is even simpler and even harder for insecure people to handle. A short boundary. "I'm not okay with that." That's it. No lecture, no emotional explanation, no attempt to win approval. Most people over-explain when they feel attacked. They start justifying their actions, defending their choices, or listing reasons why the comment was unfair. But the more you explain, the more you position yourself as someone seeking validation. Over-explaining communicates uncertainty. A short boundary communicates stability. For example, if someone interrupts you repeatedly and dismisses your opinion, you calmly say, "Please let me finish." Then you continue speaking. If someone makes a personal jab, you say, "I don't find that funny." Delivered calmly, this creates discomfort, but not for you. Short boundaries work because they are clear and contained. They don't invite debate. They don't escalate. They don't beg for understanding. They simply define a line. And confident people respect lines that are drawn without emotional chaos. Here's the deeper psychological shift. When you set boundaries without overreaction, you demonstrate that you are not afraid of temporary tension. And people who rely on subtle disrespect often count on your fear of tension. Remove that fear, and their leverage disappears. Both of these responses share the same foundation: emotional control. You are not reacting. You are positioning. And when you position yourself calmly under pressure, people begin to reconsider whether testing you is worth it. Response number 3, the strategic non-reaction. Not every act of disrespect deserves your words. Some deserve your stillness. One of the most powerful responses in any social dynamic is the strategic non-reaction. This is not passive. It is not avoidance. It is controlled restraint. Many people provoke others simply to get a reaction, a smirk, a defensive tone, a visible shift in body language. When they see that reaction, they feel impact. And impact is what they were looking for. But when you don't react, when your face remains composed, your posture unchanged, your tone steady, something unusual happens. The energy falls flat. Imagine someone makes a sarcastic comment designed to undermine you in front of others. Instead of laughing nervously or snapping back, you pause briefly, maintain eye contact, and continue the conversation as if the comment did not deserve your attention. No tension, no acknowledgement, no visible irritation. That silence creates psychological discomfort, because now the disrespectful comment hangs in the air without emotional fuel. The person who delivered it becomes more exposed than you. Others in the room begin to notice who broke composure and who maintained it. The key distinction here is intention. A reactive silence feels wounded. A strategic silence feels controlled. You are not swallowing your pride. You are choosing not to reward low-level behavior with high-level energy. This response works especially well with individuals who rely on emotional dominance. They test you, hoping to create instability. When instability never arrives, they lose interest. Over time, people adjust their behavior around those who are difficult to provoke. They stop attempting subtle jabs because the payoff disappears. Emotional neutrality is not weakness. It is leverage. When someone cannot control your emotional state, they cannot control the interaction. And in many cases, that is enough to make disrespect backfire without you saying a single word. Response number 4. The soft redirect. Disrespect doesn't always come as an insult. Sometimes it shows up as interruption, dismissal, someone talking over you as if your voice carries less weight. In group settings, this is one of the most common forms of subtle power play. Most people respond in one of two ways. They either talk louder and compete for space, which makes them look emotional, or they go quiet and surrender the floor, which lowers their perceived authority. The Stoic chooses a third option, a soft redirect. If someone interrupts you mid-sentence, calmly say, "Let me finish." Then continue speaking at the same pace. No irritation, no raised volume, no defensive explanation, just continuation. This works because authority is often communicated through assumption. When you assume your right to speak, others subconsciously adjust to that assumption. Confidence does not need to shout. Imagine you are presenting an idea, and someone cuts you off with, "That won't work." Instead of arguing immediately, you respond evenly, "I'll explain the full idea first." Then you proceed. You do not rush. You do not speed up. You do not look flustered. Your body language reinforces your words. Steady posture, measured tone, controlled breathing. Why does this matter? Because composure under interruption signals internal hierarchy. You are not scrambling to protect your status. You are operating as though your position is stable, and stability is persuasive. People tend to follow the emotional tempo of whoever appears most grounded. When you redirect calmly, you reset the tempo of the interaction. Over time, this pattern changes how others treat you. They begin to hesitate before interrupting. They sense that you will not collapse or escalate. You will simply reclaim your space. Soft redirection is not about dominance. It is about presence. And presence, when consistent, becomes authority. When you carry yourself as if you belong in the room, eventually the room agrees. Response number 5. The detached exit. Sometimes the strongest response is not a sentence, it's distance. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, ignores your boundaries, or tries to undermine you consistently, no clever phrase will fix that dynamic. At that point, the issue is no longer a single test. It's a pattern, and patterns require repositioning. The Stoic understands a principle that many people ignore. Attention is currency. Every time you engage emotionally, argue, explain, or defend yourself to someone who has already shown a lack of respect, you are investing energy in a low-return interaction, and that investment signals tolerance. The detached exit is simple. You reduce access. Shorter conversations, fewer explanations, less availability. You stop volunteering your time, your thoughts, and your emotional reactions. You become polite, but unavailable. This is not punishment. It is alignment. If someone disrespects you casually and you continue giving them full access to your presence, you silently communicate that the behavior is acceptable. But when your warmth, engagement, and attention begin to shrink, something shifts. They feel the loss of influence. For example, if a colleague constantly undermines you, you stop debating with them privately. You keep communication concise. You engage only when necessary. Your tone remains calm, but your investment drops. If a friend repeatedly makes cutting remarks disguised as humor, you stop rewarding those comments with laughter or long conversations. You engage less. No announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just controlled withdrawal. Why does this work? Because many forms of disrespect are fueled by access. The person wants your reaction, your energy, your validation, or your attention. When that supply disappears, the behavior often loses its incentive. And even if it doesn't, something more important happens. You protect your emotional stability. Stoicism is not about winning every interaction. It is about refusing to attach your identity to unstable environments. When you master the detached exit, you send a clear message without saying much at all. Access to me is conditional. And that realization alone makes disrespect far less appealing. All 5 of these responses share one core principle. Emotional stability is power. Not loudness, not dominance, not the perfect comeback. Stability. When someone disrespects you, they are looking for movement, a crack in your composure, a signal that they've touched something fragile. But when your identity is not dependent on their approval, something changes. You stop reacting from ego. You start responding from control. The Stoics believed that your character is the only thing fully within your control. Reputation, opinions, praise, criticism, all of that exists outside you. When you anchor yourself internally, external behavior loses its ability to destabilize you. That is what makes these responses effective. Calm clarification exposes insecurity. Short boundaries define limits. Strategic silence removes emotional fuel. Soft redirection reclaims space. Detached exit protects your energy. None of these require aggression. None of them require you to humiliate someone in return. They simply require discipline. And discipline under pressure is rare. Over time, people adjust their behavior around those who are difficult to shake. They test less. They provoke less. They measure their words more carefully. Not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. If this resonated with you, the next step is learning how to raise your status silently before disrespect even begins. In the next video, we'll break down the subtle behaviors that make people think twice before ever testing you in the first place. Because the calmest person in the room is often the one who controls it.